control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Tonight I want to talk about an anthology comedy series called The Comic Strip Presents. There are some episodes where it is horror or mystery or sci-fi, so that's why I'm bringing it in here. But it's one of those series created roughly by the same team. There was a comedy troupe called The Comic Strip that included the likes of people like Aid Edmondson, Rick Mayall, Peter Richardson, Dawn French, Jennifer Saunders, Keith Allen, Daniel Peacock sporadically, certainly in this series, and so on. Nigel Planer. Now, what arose from this Comic Strip Presents actually aired on the first night of the new Channel 4 back in 1983. So it was on the very first night of that channel, and they did an episode called Five Go Mad in Dorset, which was very funny and very successful. However, they had... in terms of how this was put out, it was put out as two series, all on Channel 4. But then it became much more sporadic. They made some feature films, for example, The Supergrass and Eat the Rich. And then they kind of started to have one-off specials. And it was often a parody of other TV programs or movies. Sometimes it was just wholly original. And it was very swingy. It was very up and down. There were some really good episodes and there were some really poor episodes. And I speak of a fan of the comic strip. But looking back, there are some patchy ones. So, the first series didn't particularly have anything horrific. There was one episode called War where Britain was invaded by communists, so there was kind of an action-y Red Dawn kind of vibe to that, but it was a bit silly. Probably the most famous episode from season 1 was one called Bad News Tour, and featuring this sort of fake brand, which is a bit like Spinal Tap, a British version of Spinal Tap, called Bad News. That was also very funny. That one was written by Aid Edmondson. So the real standouts from this particular first season were probably Five Go Mad in Dorset and Bad News. The one I specifically watched and wanted to talk about tonight was the first one in the run that I consider horror or sci-fi or mystery adjacent. Though there is one which is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of Rebecca, I guess, called Susie. However, the one I specifically wanted to talk about was one called Slags. This was season 2, episode 7, and it's basically a future dystopian story about a gang of teenagers called the Slags. But the two leaders of the gang were a pair of sisters, one called Passion and one called Little Sister, played by Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders. Get out of prison and meet up and reform the old gang because they want to take their territory back. The territory is run by a gang called the Hawaiians, which is kind of fun. And this is, interestingly, that gang, they're quite smooth, they wear Hawaiian shirts, was headed by a character played by Anthony Head, the Giles from Buffy is probably his most famous role, and it's kind of fun to see him quite young. And it's kind of a fun one. It's not great, but it's fun. There's basically a rumble, and they're all kind of. It's really they find some really bleak places to film in Britain for this. Interestingly, it's written by Jennifer Saunders, but she cast herself as the character called Little Sister, who's quite unattractive. It's kind of weird because she's kind of can't talk properly. She's got really big teeth. And you know, sometimes people say things about it. It's kind of a weird play on West Side Story 2, because Little Sister kind of falls for the head of the Hawaiians and vice versa, and stuff like that. But it all resolves very poorly. Not a great episode, has to be said, but it's okay. I'd say it's middle range for this particular series. And it was okay. I don't really want to say much more than that, actually. It was quite interesting imagery, but it looks like it was shot on 16mm to me. I could be wrong. It's slightly better than video, but very fuzzy. It could be the cameras weren't very good. I don't really know. That aired, just to give you a perspective, on the 11th of February 1984. Now, this also was the last one in season 2. And the last time we had kind of a regular season, as it were. After that, it became specials. But there were some really notable ones in the specials that kind of veer into horror too, that I particularly like. There was, the movie they made called Eat the Rich was about basically a restaurant. So it was a movie running a restaurant, but it was cannibalism. It was essentially a cannibalism riff, so that was going to be interesting. But the one I particularly like, the one I would strongly recommend to any genre fans, is one called The Yob. Written by Keith Allen and Daniel Peacock and starring Keith Allen. It's essentially a parody of The Fly. Sorry, I did say there was only 2 seasons, but this was kind of lumped into a season 3, so I'm wrong there. There was actually looking at it, there was 4 seasons. My mistake. I got that completely wrong. There were 4 seasons in all. Then it became specials and films. It's because there was integration of the movies within the list, and it kind of confused me. The Yob, which was from season 3, episode 4. Is really excellent. It's a parody of The Fly. Essentially, a football hooligan and a middle-class creative type makes, videos or something. Avigant is a film director. Kind of get their genes mixed in a teleportation device, and they appear to be the same as before, but the working class football hooligan starts reading The Guardian, things like that, whereas the avant-garde film director becomes way more aggressive and sexually not aggressive, but sexually controlling, and things like that. And you kind of see the interactions and how this gets resolved. And I really like this one. I think it's one of my favourites of the Comic Strip Presents. Worth a catch, specifically like The Fly. There's some fun references. There's a look and feel to it that really evokes The Fly, and I really enjoyed it. Another one later on was one called... brace yourself for this title. Space Virgins from the Planet Sex. Okay. Basically, sci-fi, right? Sexy female aliens come to Earth looking for men to impregnate them. They basically kidnap men and force them to have sex with these beautiful women until the men get fed up with it, kind of. However, there is a James Bond type. Well, he is a James Bond, basically, played by Peter Richardson. Excellently played by Peter Richardson. He's not called James Bond, he's called James Blonde. Who, has been told off by HR for his sexist ways, but they realise they need a sexist to go and save the day. So that's a kind of fun one too, and kind of genre as well. And then finally, I think there's one about a possession called Demonella. Not a great one. No, it's not possession. It's someone who makes a deal with the devil. There is a possession one in here somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's not very memorable. And Demonella is about someone making a deal with the devil, and stuff like that. And there's a few others which kind of a mystery, but that's about it. Yeah, an interesting show. In all, there was 42 episodes, TV episodes, and 4 movies. And it all started from a very short film called The Comic Strip, which I think was a semi-documentary about, people who worked at the comic strip. Directed by Julian Temple, who went on to direct a few other things. Most interestingly, the car crash that is called Absolute Beginners, which I quite like, but really doesn't work as a film. I think he directed that. So, yeah, an interesting series. And each story, it is an anthology series. Each story is completely different from the last. It's just the cast recur in different characters. A few of the episodes do have a follow-up. For example, Bad News has more bad news. And I think there's 3 different 5 Go Mad ones. There's 5 Go Mad in Dorset, 5 Go Mad and Mescaline, and I think one I've not seen called 5 Go Mad in Rehab. So yeah, there is that. Okay, I'm going to wind out there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you. Until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to